Hello there, ladies and gents, and welcome. This is a slightly unusual stream, although they're all unusual in their own way. Today, I'm joined by Mr. John Cooper, and we are going to be doing a film review. We are going to be talking about Thor, Love and Thunder, which came out in the cinemas earlier this summer. Now, John, you've rewatched it only in the past week, I think?
Yeah, I watched it this last Friday. I figured, you know what, let's see, might as well try. I know you wanted to review the film at the time that it came out, but I said, I've seen the film as well. I'd like to join you. But then I think some things got delayed a bit and all that stuff. And then Disney Plus came out and all that. So I figured, you know what, might as well rewatch it again to see if my opinions change a bit after watching it from the big screen to like one of the more smaller screens of TV.
I see. And it's a different effect you get on the second viewing as well. Of seeing something for the second time, because this does happen. I'll get these little ideas for a slightly different type of stream to do, and more often than not, I'll just forget about it after a few weeks. But it was actually you who'd reminded me not that long ago. Oh, did you want to do that review? So I thought, yeah, go on then. Yeah. Let's do it. You've rewatched it. But before we get into the film itself, then, just the Marvel Cinematic Universe more broadly.
Yes.
I can't quite recall if we've discussed this before, but would you describe yourself as being a fan of the Marvel films?
Yes, I'd say huge fan, and we did do a review on my channel, which has not really been doing many content, to be honest. I figured we'd try and do like movies, media, and all that stuff with like the bullet chat there, but it just never picked up to escape politics for a while. And we ended up talking a bit about politics anyway when it came to Doctor Who.
That doesn't surprise me.
But yeah, and we reviewed Avengers Endgame together, which I think probably
did we?
Yeah, we reviewed that movie together, I believe.
Crikey, I must have a black hole in my head for that. It's clearly all the politics pushing everything else out. That must be the problem.
Yeah. So I'm like a huge fan. Perhaps maybe more of a huge fan than most other people. As I probably liked some stuff from Phase 4 a lot more than others many have said that the MCU is going in decline, it's finished, blah, blah, blah. But I've genuinely liked the MCU stuff. Now, granted, there are maybe some things I've disagreed with. For example, I've not really been a fan of like the MCU Spider-Man with like being a sort of Iron Man Jr., if you will. I mean, that was one of the biggest criticisms, though. There are those that like the different stuff, but yeah.
Because I think. Oh, sorry.
Let's see. And well, go your point on first. Do your comment first, and I'll continue.
Okay, yeah. So what I was going to say is because before we started talking about the film, I kind of wanted to get a feel for where we both were in terms of our relationship with Marvel films, sort of how into them we are in general, sort of as setting a baseline for how we compare this film to the rest of them.
Yeah.
So by the sounds of it, you're a pretty solid Marvel fan. I imagine you've seen nearly all of the Marvel films that have come out since Iron Man, then.
Yes, I've practically seen it, with the exception of like the first Thor movie and the Incredible Hulk and the first Captain America movie. I've seen every MCU movie in the cinema. Some of them even multiple times, but of course, given the current crisis, that is going to be limited to one, and I need to save my money anyway for budgeting reasons. So, can only do that for probably will only do that for like a special occasion, really.
Gotcha. I think I've only seen two of them in the cinema. You know, I think the only ones I've seen in the cinema were Guardians of the Galaxy about 8 odd years ago, and then more recently that Spider-Man crossover one.
Oh yeah, No Way Home.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see.
But I would say that I've seen most of them. I'd say that easily over half of the ones that I've seen, I've only watched the one time. But sort of, you know, the big ones, the different Avenger ones and stuff, I've probably seen those a handful of times each. I haven't seen loads of the Phase 4 films. I've maybe only seen 2 or 3 of those. So I guess I'd describe myself as a fan, but
more of a casual sense.
Yeah, more of a casual, as a person who goes, yeah, I like those films, they're good, but I'm not quite as far as, say, buying merchandise or anything like that. But I just, I think most of them are fairly solid films.
Yeah, for the most part, they're good general Hollywood blockbuster B movies, really. I mean, there are some good gems in them. I mean, let's see, people would probably say something like Guardians of the Galaxy, the first Iron Man, let's see, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and arguably, let's see, the first Avengers movie, and of course, Infinity War, and maybe Black Panther, depending on on how you feel about it politically.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I think with not just Black Panther or films, but it seems to be a broader thing happening with a lot of Disney films in general these days. There's always some kind of a political culture war type thing around it, and I mean, I watched Black Panther and I enjoyed it for what it was, completely uninterested by whatever the buzz for or against was it otherwise.
Yeah.
But what I want to say then is before we get on to Thor, this one was directed by Takai Waititi, if I've said that name correct, and also directed Thor Ragnarok. Now, Thor Ragnarok received very good reviews, whereas Love and Thunder was a little bit more mixed. And I'd personally say I liked Ragnarok a lot more. So just before we get onto this one, because we're talking about the sector here, Thor Ragnarok, did you enjoy that one?
Yes, I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was like one of the best films in Phase 3, or one of the best superhero films in 2017 and all that stuff. As I think quite a few films were coming out in 2017. I definitely think it revamped my interest in the Thor movies because, well, it did for most people anyway, because, well, Thor the Dark World was a bit of a letdown, really, I think, for most people. It's like they didn't quite know what to do with it and all that stuff. I mean, besides introducing an Infinity Stone.
It felt like a very sort of fresh change of direction. Like they suddenly breathed a lot of color into the Thor films with Ragnarok. They sort of went in a slightly different direction, a bit more of the comedy. There were a lot of elements to it I liked. It didn't take itself too seriously, but you had a good time with it, you know.
Yeah, it was a bit of a soft reboot, a bit, though. It ended up killing most of Thor's cast from the previous films, and the human cast were completely absent, with being explained that Thor broke up with Jane Foster and all that stuff to explain, because I don't think Natalie Portman came back, and I think originally Patty Jenkins, the director of the 2 Wonder Woman films, was originally supposed to direct Thor the Dark World, but due to some creative differences, that was changed to a different director, I believe. So there's stuff like that, I think, that caused it to be a bit of a thing. But yeah, and it also kind of like Thor Ragnarok also brought back a Chris Hemsworth interest in doing the Thor movies again, because I think there was rumors that he was going to probably try and step down after this, but he seems to enjoy doing the character, at least. I mean, that was the rumors I've heard.
Well, I mean, I suppose that Ragnarok allowed him to sort of flex some slightly different acting muscles, because as time's gone on, sort of Thor has got more and more sort of comedic attributes to him.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in a way, because I'm talking about this as a positive when we're talking about Ragnarok, but I'm going to end up saying it's a negative when we get onto Love and Thunder.
Yeah. No, I do know that there are some comic book fans that don't like Ragnarok's direction, or feel like it's not too faithful for the source material or the previous 4 films. I feel like they made Thor into sort of like Hercules, like from the comics, because Hercules is more of the comedic superhero than Thor is in terms of superhero gods they have.
It's probably worth me, in that case, offering a disclaimer to anyone who may be listening that I'm only really familiar with Marvel via the movies. I've never been much of a comic books reader, so I'm only basing my assessment off of the films and off of the earlier films, comparing it with this.
That's fair. I mean, I'm a bit of a comic book fan myself, though. Granted, I haven't really read too much of Thor, to be honest. I mean, I did digitally purchase the comic that one of the 2 comics that this Thor film is loosely adapted from. But I do know that originally when Stanley created Thor, he was originally Donald Blake, a guy called Donald Blake that possessed the power of Thor and all that stuff. But then it was revealed that it was actually his father who banished him and erased his memories, and it was all part of a plan to teach him a lesson, but at the same time a plan to prevent Ragnarok from happening and all that stuff. And other than that, I know that Iron Man cloned Thor in the Civil War comic book, which that's a whole load of, let's see, kind of worms to talk about, but we're not going to do it here. But yeah.
Shall I move us on to Love and Thunder then? If you're happy for us to get onto that, or did you want to do some more background on the comic books?
Let's see. But no, I think let's see enough background for that though. The only thing I could probably say is that interesting trivia is that the character Korg was actually in the very first comic issue as an adversary to Thor, I think. But other than that, not much else.
Okay. So when we started off with Thor: Love and Thunder, Thor was traveling around with the Guardians of the Galaxy after sort of teaming up with them in Avengers Endgame. Well, I mean, they all teamed up with each other in Avengers Endgame, but specifically he spent a fair bit of those couple of movies with those guys.
Yeah, let's see. They rescued him after the Thanos' attack on his ship, and he killed his brother and all that stuff. Though he came back in Loki, of course. And they sort of did some bonding there, particularly with Rocket and Groot. We went to like the dwarf star to create his new hammer or axe, if you will. Sorry, go on.
Yes, and there was quite a good bit of comedic interplay between Thor and Star-Lord. You know, you had Hemsworth and Chris Pratt sort of like, you know, vying against each other to be the alpha male within the Guardians of the Galaxy. Previously, Star-Lord had been sort of like the unofficial leader of the group. Then Thor comes along and he's a literal god. So naturally, there's some rivalry there. I like that.
It doesn't help that Drax goes, "This is a man. You're just a bit flabby."
Exactly. Yeah. But given all that chemistry and kind of how well this slightly more comedic Thor fit in with the Guardians, I was kind of surprised that in Love and Thunder we got sort of, you know, he was with the Guardians for the first 5-10 minutes and then they flew away in a ship and disappeared. I guess a bit of me had been hoping more of that film would involve them, but it ended up sort of being this is where they went, they had lots of adventures together off screen and then they disappeared.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was surprised. I figured they'd be in maybe at the least first 30 minutes of the film, not the first 10.
Yeah, but that said, the opening sequence that we saw, which is him and the Guardians were down on this planet. They were trying to defeat these, I don't know, they look like Mad Max bird creatures on flying motorbikes or whatever. And, you know, the big action-packed fight sequence, lots of little comedy spots as well. In the end, he accidentally completely tears down their big historic temple and he goes, another classic Thor adventure. You know, all very meta and self-referential and everything. I was happy enough with that. It was a shame we didn't get more of it, but I enjoyed that for what it was at the very least.
Yeah, it felt like a better opener than what For the Dark World was when it did a sort of similar sort of thing with Thor and all that stuff. So, and also I guess you could even, and it was also similar in the manner of like what happened with Thor in like the let's see, Ragnarok, when he was fighting that sort of like demon guy that was going to cause Ragnarok in the end and all that stuff.
Yeah, where he's all chained up and he's just like, you know, cracking jokes at him and everything and hardly taking the things here. Yeah, I enjoyed that as well. I suppose this was the thing. I'd heard mixed reviews of it before I went and saw the film, right? Yeah. But when I first got in there and I saw him and the Guardians and they did this big action scene and, you know, classic Thor adventure and even the bloody screaming goats, all of that made me think I was enjoying it. I was sitting through that bit of the film and I was enjoying it. And I was like, this is funny. This is entertaining. I hope the rest of the film is like this.
Yeah, I definitely say what people say about what happens afterwards. I'd say the first 10 minutes are just perfection and like comedy gold and all that stuff.
Yeah, and funnily, I mean, from the trailer, because whenever you see a trailer for something, you can never quite piece together the film in your head until you've actually gone and watched it. I actually thought that this opening sequence was the climax of the film. I didn't realize that it was just the opening sequence, if you get me. So I was kind of surprised that I saw it all first.
I assume that was either going to be the beginning or the middle part. At the very least, it seemed like this would be all the light-heart stuff, and then they'd get to all the serious dark stuff with like Gore, the God Butcher, and all that stuff. Let's see, but yeah.
Yeah, just before I move us on to Gore, because talking about opening sequences, there was a separate one that involved him specifically in his origin story. But I'd say the only thing with the Guardians bit, so, you know, I enjoyed that sequence for what it was. I thought it was funny. I thought it was, you know, self-referential. I liked the way it went. I felt that it was just all very quick in regards to the Guardians themselves. It basically felt like they had a cameo in it, and that was it. I think most of them only got a line of dialogue each or so, you know?
Yeah, and they even had that, let's see, Yondu's right-hand man return to the Guardians, who was absent from the two Avengers films for some reason. But yeah, it's funny that he seems to keep marrying a woman from every planet. And there was also Korg with like Thor there, so that was like, so that also explains why he's narrating and all that stuff throughout the film.
Yes, that's right. That's the other thing, isn't it? Kor, who is the big rock guy who they picked up in Ragnarok as one of Thor's buddies, he's there sort of threading the film together with bits of narration here and there.
Yeah.
What did you make of that overall?
I think it worked up to a certain point, at least when Thor meets a very familiar face, let's just say, until we get to that part. But
yes, okay. I suppose we'll do it in chronological order, so we won't give spoilers, I suppose, just yet.
Yeah.
But that you know, it was a little bit kitschy, and you know, it was quite. Oh, isn't it nice? We've got Kor here going, oh, Thor goes and does this, and Thor goes and does that, and threading a little story and whatever. But some of it felt a bit unnecessary to me as well.
I will admit, it did seem to be a bit tedious about, oh, and this guy and that guy died and all that stuff. But I guess it is to go to show you that Thor has lost a lot of people.
Yes. But I mean, almost obviously, you know, the person from Thor's past that turns up in the film and becomes a big player in it. It also felt like part of the job of this narration was in order to remind the audience, oh, hey, look, I know this character hasn't been in the films for like 10 years, but this person exists. Don't forget about them. Thor hasn't mentioned them for a while, but actually they're a really important part of Thor's life still.
Yeah, 5 years technically. Well, technically, Jane Foster hasn't appeared since 2013 with Thor: The Dark World. But let's see, it's been 5 years since Thor Ragnarok. So
okay. So within the timeline of the films, but as far as cinematic releases go, the better part of a decade or so.
Yeah. So it's sort of like that, but yeah. Now, in many ways, it's a good way of also possibly, I think it was a good way of showing what's happened. If you haven't ever watched a Thor movie before, this is all that's happened in those previous ones. So it's a way of like saying, okay, this is what happened in there. This is what you need to know for now.
I can very much understand that, and I can understand on one hand the importance of, you know, if you're a fresh member of the audience who's never seen a Marvel film. I mean, God knows why you're starting watching them at Thor 4. But assuming you've never seen one before, it gives you a little bit of backstory introduction. It just kind of seemed odd that, you know, most other Marvel films don't really do that. Most of them don't go to any lengths to print out a big backstory narration to clue you into, you know, it felt as if they were really doing it for the purpose of saying, hey, look, I know you know Thor, but by the way, he's still in love with Jane Foster and it still affects him a lot. We just haven't told you that in the last few films.
Yeah. I suppose you could say, to be fair, it's also the fact that this is the first solo fourth superhero movie for Marvel and all that stuff. Let's see.
Awesome. Yes, it is. Wow.
Yeah. There is like Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, though granted, that was originally a 2-part film, but then they just got different name titles. I do know that Captain America, Sam Wilson as Captain America is getting a Captain America movie, and I believe that I think it's been recently announced that the miniseries that was Ironheart, it was sort of like someone called Roy Williams, a young black teenage genius girl who also was able to use the Iron Man suit, sort of like a successor to Iron Man. I think that's going to become a movie, so that could be an unofficial Iron Man 4, but with like an entirely new character, if you will. I know.
I see.
I know. Let's see. It's in many ways. I will probably say this for the comics. they've been introducing quite a lot of legacy heroes, and many of them have been diverse, which let's see, from what I can tell, some people believe they're planning these for like future films, but others accusing them of just being, let's see, part of a political agenda and replacing classic superheroes, depending on who you ask. Like I said,
well, as I say, I'm not that clued into the comics aspect of it,
yeah.
so I only really know what I see in the films, and all I can say at the very least is, if Tony, not Tony Stark, that is Iron Man. If Robert Downey Jr. is no longer going to be Iron Man because he doesn't want to do the films anymore, it only makes sense to me they're recasting it. So
yeah.
I'm happy. I don't necessarily expect them to go, and we just want to get a different actor to play Tony Stark. It's like, they killed off Tony Stark, so
yeah.
If they're making
new character.
if they're making a new Iron Man, then so be it. They could have whoever they want sort of as the character.
But yeah,
I'll get us on to Gore anyway.
Yeah, the last thing I'll probably say in the Guardians of the Galaxy bit is I kind of feel like they should. Let's see, I know there's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy special coming up. I thought there was going to at least have that special with Thor in it, and then afterwards they part ways. But that was clearly not the case. But anyway, go on, get to Gore.
Yeah. I do feel like there was more to be had with Thor and the Guardians, and sadly, it just seemed like they sort of went, they had so many classic adventures off screen, but you're not allowed to see them.
It's kind of like the second set of Avengers after Age of Ultron. It's like then afterwards came Ant-Man, which only saw one Avenger, and then Civil War happened.
Yes.
But anyway, go on.
Okay, yeah. So we spent a little while talking about Thor and the Guardians and the fight sequence, but really the true opening to the film was the introduction to its antagonist, which is Gore. So Gore is traveling through the desert with his daughter. They're both dying of starvation, dehydration. He's saying a little prayer to his god to try and save them from this. Sadly, it's not enough. The daughter perishes. And only then does he stumble across this oasis in the desert and meets this god that he'd been worshipping all this time. And it turns out to be a massive disappointment. The god is greedy and totally indifferent towards the circumstances. He's, I've been praying to you all my life. And the god says, it doesn't matter. I'll find more people to worship me, you silly little man. And the guy, the Necro sword, right? I love the concept of it. I love the idea of it's this sword with the ability to kill gods, and the moment a person wields it, it sort of corrupts them, and the sword takes over their mind, and it makes them evil and makes them seek out gods to kill. That's a great concept, but again, it almost felt as if it was a tad bit rushed, where the god was like, we just killed a guy with a necro sword, and there it is on the ground. And then suddenly Gore, I'm going to get the sword now and stab you. But overall, I did like this introduction to Gore. I thought that it was a solid origin story for an antagonist. And I feel too often in a lot of the Marvel films, you get some good antagonists, but some of them just feel sort of plastered on. It could be anyone, villain of the week kind of thing. Christian Bale as Gore probably was my favorite bit of this film.
Oh, yeah. I definitely say the highlight for this film is Christian Bale's Gore and all that stuff. I definitely say that if people like this movie, it's because of this villain. And arguably, I know that they were, and when they were hyping up this movie, they said that Gore would probably be a better villain than Thanos. Now, whether or not you actually believe that, I mean, Thanos is hard to top, to be honest. But I can definitely see that they were very confident in how good this villain was, or how good people were going to interpret this villain.
Yes. Right. Before we go any further, very quickly, I was going to leave the comments till the end, but there's one that I think we'll address from Average Joe here, who said, I was put off MCU because the first Marvel I watched was Hulk 2003. Oh, you poor thing. So I like the original Spider-Man and the Batman trilogies. Which Marvel movie is the best to start on the MCU journey? Honestly, I would say the first one. I think Iron Man is a solid film. It's probably a little bit basic and by the numbers compared to the grandiose tapestry of Marvel you have these days. But I don't know about you, John, but I would say Iron Man's probably the best one he wants to start off with.
Yeah, arguably Iron Man, though. Arguably, you could technically start off with just about nearly any of the Phase 1 movies except maybe Iron Man 2, but
or
no,
Incredible Hulk. I would say that given that you already saw Hulk 2003 and weren't that impressed, and given also that the Hulk is actually recast by the time they get to Avengers anyway, you could probably skip over the Hulk film and you wouldn't have lost too much for it.
Yeah, and to be honest, see, the canonicity of that film was in question because, like, I think a different studio actually owns the rights to Hulk and all that stuff, and you have to get their permission to film it. I mean, the only time when characters from that movie showed up again was, I think, where let's see, Thunderbolt Ross for like Civil War, but that made him more of an antagonist to Captain America than to Hulk. And now the Abomination has reappeared in She-Hulk, the sort of Disney Plus series that they're doing online right now.
I see, but so in a nutshell, to answer that question for Average Joe, then you'd say you want to start with Phase 1. I say definitely start with Iron Man. You'd say pretty much most of them, but maybe not Iron Man 2, maybe not.
But I would probably recommend, let's see, Iron Man, really, because that is the first one. But let's see. And it's probably arguably the best of the, let's see, origin stories of the things and all that stuff. So, yeah.
You're getting in on the ground floor there, you know, so...
Yeah. And arguably, you probably could understand, let's see, Avengers more with just Iron Man and Iron Man 2. I mean, I saw those two films only before seeing Avengers, though. Arguably, you probably would want to see Captain America and Thor before seeing Avengers.
Yeah, I'd recommend that. Probably Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and then just go to Avengers, and you'll recognize most of the faces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, I'll take us back. Oh, yeah. Sorry, go on. Say your final bit on that.
I just want to answer Average Joe's average question. I'd probably say I'm more of an MCU fan than a DC Extended Universe fan because, well, the DC is a bit of a mess right now. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I've certainly seen far more. I mean, there have been more Marvel films than DC films in the last 10 years, but I have seen far more Marvel ones than I have DC. Right, so getting back to Gore. So anyway, you know, Christian Bale, absolutely fantastic as him. Steals every scene that he's in, I think. You cannot take your eyes off the guy when he's on screen. Yeah. He really gets into his character. And like I say, apart from my slight little quibble over going, oh, isn't it convenient this Necro Sword was just lying next to him? As far as, what's the word I'm searching for here? You know, as far as a purpose goes, as far as a reason for him to become this villain and to have this kind of origin story of wanting revenge against these callous gods who, you know, for all their power cannot save the mere mortals from their fates when they could easily intervene. I think that's a good motivation. And it's believable enough that he goes and does what he does as a result of this.
Yeah, I know in the comics the motivation is a bit different, and I think it was because you saw two gods fighting or something, but I think, let's say, like with Thanos, they did change it to more fit into the MCU kind of thing, and even Gore's design is much more alien in the comics, which some people complain for comic book accuracy, but I think Christian Bale's performance is so good, I think it was a necessary change, and I'm all the more happier for it and all that stuff. So yeah, this is just the MCU version of Gore, and he's pretty good.
So at this point in the film, we've had Gore's origin, which I think we both agree was pretty damn good. We've had that very enjoyable action sequence with Thor and the Guardians and all that joviality, and that was all a lot of fun as well. Thor gets called away because he hears that there's someone going around murdering a bunch of gods, and he wants to find out what's going on. So him and the Guardians part way, and he goes to investigate that.
Yeah, and particularly he had a distress call from his friend Sif, who we have not seen since For the Dark World.
Yes, I was trying to, when I watched this, I was trying to think, have I seen her before, or is she just a new character that's been introduced that I'm supposed to just be like, oh, this is one of Thor's mates? I honestly could not remember too easily, but she was in a previous film, was she?
Yeah, she was in the first two Thor movies. I think she had some disagreement with Marvel, so she ended up being cut out of the third film. Then I think they said, let's see, she ended up being snapped away by Thanos, and of course the snap came back and all that stuff. She briefly had a cameo in Loki, let's see, and now she's finally here after so long.
Gotcha. And he goes and visits her, and she says, she's dying because she's been wounded, and there's this really bad guy going around killing a bunch of people. You need to sort it out, Thor. The gods are in danger. Now, up until this point, John, I was enjoying this film. I liked the antagonist. I liked his backstory. I liked Thor and the action and the Guardians and all the rest of it. And then we travel back to Earth, and Jane Foster has terminal stage 4 cancer. Yeah. And I felt, for one thing, it was a strange juxtaposition between all this sort of, comedy elements and what we're used to with having seen, Thor in Ragnarok or what have you. The Guardians had more or less just left the screen. And then suddenly we're like, I think she's there having chemotherapy. It took a very, very sudden turn to a very serious and somber kind of mood very, very quick. Well, I'll say a tad more on this quickly then. I don't think that cancer shouldn't be done in even in a Marvel film. I think that that it's reasonable enough that if you can weave it into the story appropriately, and the overall film has the right kind of tone for that to be part of the plot, that makes enough sense to me. I don't think it should be off limits as a thing to use as a narrative device. But in this film, it felt off. It felt odd. The way that they handled it, the way that they jumped so quickly from serious about cancer, jokes about cancer, comedy scene going on, sad scene going on. Sorry. It felt like just tonally, it didn't seem to fit very well.
Let's see. I believe this is partly due to this sort of thing is partly due to the fact that they were actually following the comics on this one, because let's see, in the comics in the last few years, there's been like a female Thor, which has of course caused controversy, as you probably can expect, because the internet and also PC culture war and all that stuff. And let's see, it was a bit of a mystery of who she was for a long time and all that stuff. And this is probably the second part of one of the other sort of comic book storylines besides the Gore one that they've merged together into this new film and all that stuff. And it was revealed to be Jane Foster, who was dying of cancer. So she's been given the power of Thor, and she's going to use whatever time she has left to do as much good as she can and all that stuff. So she can let's see, do something with the last moments, with the last bit of strength of her life, if you will. So they were adapting from that, if you will. And that's why this is in this film.
I see. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can understand adapting it from the source material, and I can even understand the overall story of it working. It's just the tone and the way that it was intermixed with all these comedy scenes as well. A story about Jane Foster has cancer, gets Thor's hammer, becomes Mighty Thor. They team up, they take down Gore. All of that on paper sounds fantastic to me. It was the delivery. It was the way that it was done. The execution. Thank you. That was what fell off very quickly as well. Random Quotes has given a £2 super chat. Thank you very much. Who says that infamous line, "Biden was never going to be Bernie" by Captain Swiss.
Yeah, okay, I get that I get this guy wants to give you the £2 and all that stuff every time, but at least do let's see, MCU quote when we're doing a film.
Cancer was never going to be finger snap. There you go. An Average Joe says, was it like an Uncle Ben being shocked moment sandwiched between comedic moments? The best way I can answer that, Joe, is to say that it feels like the entire film was that. It feels like the whole film was just a succession of Thor's being a silly man and dying of cancer. Thor's being a silly man again. It felt like that throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. I definitely say this is probably where the comedy should have probably toned down a bit. And let's see, because I think what would work this film better is if you had the comedy first and all that stuff, and then as the film goes on, it gets a bit more serious. You can still have your jokes here and then, but when it's appropriate and not every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's exactly it. And this is the thing. Some scenes they tried to play them completely straight and tried to make them as serious as they could. but it obviously felt a bit off knowing that you just had other silly scenes right next to it. And then other times they couldn't even keep it tonally the same within a single scene. It would even be a scene about cancer, and then it would be joke cancer. This is the case. I mean, Marvel films all over the place have always been a mixture of, action and comedy. They've always had these little throwaway lines and little comedy beats, and it's part of their trademark of what they do. But this film really turned it up to 11. They did not want to allow anything to breathe without throwing in jokes that, for me at least, only landed about half the time.
Yeah. Some films, I will admit, in the MCU are a bit more comedic and some are a bit more serious. Films like Captain America would be a bit more serious because, well, they're also, it's like a man from like the time of World War II living in the modern world and dealing with the political climate of that world and it clashing with his ideals. So, yeah, you'd be more serious with that.
So let me put it to you this way then. If we were to have two piles of films, ones that should be more comedic and ones that should be more serious, and I tell you that we have a Thor film where there's a man whose daughter dies, he gets the power of a necro sword and goes around murdering gods. Meanwhile, Thor's ex-girlfriend Jane Foster has cancer, gets a hammer to become another Thor, and the two of them team up to kill this god murdering maniac. Would you put that in the funny column or the serious column?
I would put that more in the serious column. In many ways, it feels like the darkest film since the first Thor movie.
Yes, I would. Tonally, it should be a serious film. Don't get me wrong. You can have occasional, and I do mean occasional, moments of levity, and there's not even too much wrong with having it as being fun and silly at the beginning before all the serious stuff takes hold. But the film tonally was absolutely all over the place. Shall I carry on a little bit further with the plot anyway? Because we're doing
the only thing left to comment on Jane is that you have brief cameos of, like, let's see, her female friend who was also in WandaVision for a bit. I like her more in WandaVision, I guess, than her Thor appearances. And that sort of like doctor that was sort of her mentor figure, telling her how she had cancer. I mean, that was just the obligatory cameo that these guys existed. Though, but I guess
remember this person, remember that person. It's the same universe, folks.
Yeah. No, I have to admit, I'm a bit surprised that they did not appear up in the end with what happened to Jane Foster. But that will be when we get there. But yeah. But go on.
So Jane, her medical treatment is not working. So she flicks through some of her books she has on Asgardian mythology and finds a little passage that suggests to her maybe the hammer might be able to help her. She goes and finds where Thor's the fractured pieces of Thor's old hammer are in a sort of an open museum or something like that. And actually, again, I think within this scene there was a bit that I liked, a funny bit that I liked. They did another one of those little plays where they had actors playing the Marvel characters in front of a little audience. I
believe the person who plays Thor is actually Chris Hemsworth's brother.
And they had, was it Matt Damon playing Loki? I'm sure Matt Damon was in it.
Hold on. Let me just.
Let me scroll down on the Wikipedia real quick.
Yeah, I want to see the bit of. Yeah, I need to see the cast a bit.
I'm sure it was Matt Damon that they had in it, which was funny enough that they get such a big name as Matt Damon just in for a little bit,
Yeah.
But anyway, in the absence of me being able to find,
Matt Damon. Apparently, he was part of the casting and all that stuff.
Okay, yeah. So again, I liked that bit. I thought that was funny. Again, it was like we'd already started getting to the bit where it was, funny, serious, but that was probably one of the last major bits of the film that I really enjoyed when it was trying to be funny. And sadly, again, it was still only within the first 20 minutes or so. But yeah, I liked that. They did a little stage play. They had other people playing the Marvel characters, and it was fun to just sort of see the way they presented it to an audience and the dramatic overacting and all of it. That was good.
I did find it weird that they just cut at the bit when the hammer was destroyed, but then again, I guess they can't really do the entire Ragnarok movie.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like this is what happened to the hammer last time. But yeah.
So Jane Foster goes up to this hammer, which is encased in glass, and suddenly, the thunder from the sky, storm clouds gather, and big puff of light or something like that. You watched it more recently than me, but suddenly, the hammer responds to her, and this is it. We're off. Jane Foster's getting superpowers. But we hadn't yet had an explanation as to why this is able to happen. It was only shortly after this they then do a flashback to back when Thor and Jane were together. And obviously this was a flashback. All these flashbacks were made purposefully for this film. It wasn't actually content of the previous films with them together.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it does also give answers to okay, how on earth did Thor and Jane Foster break up after 2 films of building up their relationship, only to have her apparently dump Thor off screen and all that stuff. Because I mean, I get that the reason why she wasn't in that film is because she wasn't. She didn't want to. I think she wasn't interested in all that stuff of coming back for a time being until they give her something a bit more significant in this film and all that stuff. But it's okay, it still feels like it was a cheap joke, but here I do kind of like how they explain that they just end up having fun, being a happy couple, but then their careers got them too busy and they sort of grew apart, and then just one of them decided to end it and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose it does fill in some blanks for the previous films. But and we also had a bit within this where Thor basically whispers to his hammer and says, "Oh, you must always protect Jane. If she's ever in danger, you must protect her," or something like that. And that's that's the reasoning that the hammer is sentient, sort of, and it listened to what Thor said. And then many years down the line, Jane Foster has cancer, so the hammer decides to grant her the Thor powers.
Yeah, no, I figured, no, I'm not sure. I suppose that's one way of getting past the "are you worthy" sort of rule thing, but.
Yes, exactly. Because the whole thing about most people not even being able to lift the hammer because it was so picky over who was deemed to be worthy. They obviously tucked in sort of but if someone who is worthy says "pretty please" with a cherry on top to the hammer, then the hammer will let someone else pick it up.
In the MCU, there's only 3 people that have lifted the hammer. For himself. Captain America, which was probably the biggest crowd-pleasing moment of Endgame, besides everyone coming back, and Vision, which caused probably the funniest moment in Age of Ultron.
Yeah. So we have that scene, and now we're back to Thor's village, which is in Norway, I want to say, or Sweden, or somewhere Nordic.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the Nordic countries where, well, face it would probably make sense because, well, they're Nordic gods, so.
Exactly. So this is their new Asgard that they've set up somewhere in Northern Europe.
And it'll probably make sense that the Nordic countries would probably allow them to have some bit of territory just because they were the gods they worshipped, at least in the past.
Yeah, and basically, I mean, what it is a glorified giant fishing village. It's not massive in scale, but it's where they've all obviously gone to make their new lives, and it kind of fits in thematic with real life Vikings and Norse mythology and how they've ended up on Earth. So it's a nice little way to twine it all together. But I'm aware that we're kind of taking a very long time retelling the story here. So I'll just say, sort of, in a nutshell, Gore turns up with his god-killing ways, and a big battle ensues in this village, and Thor starts fighting him. And at the same time, this mysterious woman Thor turns up as well. And she joins in on the action. And Thor is absolutely shocked to not only see this woman Thor, but also the fact that she has his old hammer. Again, Christian Bale in the scene, loved him. I was beginning to get the feeling of I just want more of him. I wish I got more Christian Bale scenes in this film. Every time he was on screen, I was like, don't go away. Don't leave me with the rest of them, Christian. Come back. Don't go, please. I don't want to. I don't want any more silly jokes. I don't want any more semi-improvised dialogue. Come back. But yeah, so he arrives. They have an initial battle. Obviously, he gets the better of them and disappears off, kidnapping a bunch of the kids from New Asgard.
Yeah, including Heimdall's son, which allows Thor to communicate with the kids and all that stuff.
That's right. Yeah, it was Heimdall was Idris Elba, who died in one of the previous films, and he had a son. Did we know he had a son previously?
No, I think this is just a late minute addition they've added because, well, they no longer can use the character Heimdall, so they're giving him a son that can use the powers as well. As far as I can tell, he doesn't. I'm not sure if he has a son in the comics or even in Norse mythology because, well, Thor is unique in the fact that, well, he's got his own comic lore. He's also got his Norse mythology lore and all that stuff. Because, well, he was an actual god that people worshipped at one point in human history.
So as Thor finally discovers that it is Jane Foster who is this female Thor, we get two new elements added to the film, two new comedy elements added to the film. One of which I thought was really funny, and one of which I could not stand. Okay, and I want your thoughts on both of these. Okay, the first was this idea of Thor's new it was an axe, wasn't it? It was a big axe he got made. Yes, his axe that he got from the Avengers in Infinity War and Endgame films. The idea that the axe is jealous of Thor missing his old hammer. And this, I thought that was done great. You'd even have times in certain scenes where the axe was like, sort of floating into the shots, like this angry, as if Thor was pining after this ex-girlfriend. And obviously he was in a way because it was Jane, but also the hammer and the axe looked, jealous.
Yeah, I also did like how Thor was checking, like, oh, I'm still worthy when he was lifting it temporarily, but go on.
Yeah, but and Thor would talk to the axe and say, "Oh no, you're being crazy. There's nothing going on. Don't you worry." And the fact that they're able to convey this kind of emotion from a completely inanimate object, again, I thought that was good comedic writing. I liked the way they did that.
Yeah, and the way with Cork said, "Yeah, ex-ham and your ex-girlfriend getting together." It's like
exactly.
It's like It's like two people you've gone out with now going out with each other.
So that and there were several beats during the film where the jealous axe would come into play, and every time I loved it. I found it very funny. The other thing that started happening from this point in the film onwards was Thor and Jane having scenes together and talking, and where I did not like this is that have you seen the all-women Ghostbusters remake from a few years back?
Yes, I saw that. Yes, I saw that.
Now, one of the things I hated the most about that film is that a lot of the dialogue felt improvised, but my bigger problem with that wasn't the fact that the dialogue felt improvised. It was that the dialogue was improvised and it was not funny improvisation.
You mean it was like Jane Foster trying to find her own superhero quip and all that stuff?
Yeah, and some of this stuff is, but even when they were trying to sort of get their way through the awkward scenes, going, fancy seeing you again. It struck me that perhaps there wasn't necessarily a script they were following for this. It was like the director said to them, right, you've seen each other again for the first time in ages and you feel awkward, go. And they probably did like 5 takes and just kept the camera rolling, and they just decided to use whatever footage they thought seemed best for it. That was what it felt like watching it sometimes. And I feel like I got a lot of that throughout much of the rest of the film. There were far too many scenes specifically with Jane and Thor talking to each other that felt improvised and not acted to the abilities of both of the actors involved.
Well, I'll admit, I think the quips themselves were a bit mixed bag, but I didn't think they portrayed it quite well of what happens if you see an ex for a very long time and you're not sure how you still feel about them and all that stuff. I felt that was done well. The jokes themselves, they were a hit or miss. But I definitely say I found their dynamic much more better here than I suppose for the Dark World.
But I mean, perhaps that's a way for me to put it. Actually, that it was because you're right. The dynamic of people meeting each other for the first time after ages, and they used to be in love, or maybe they still are. That there's an awkwardness to that. That was conveyed fairly well. But again, partly it was this slightly improvised feeling that happened for a lot of the rest of the film, and especially it was a lot of these forced jokes as well that I felt kind of there were certain scenes that just did not need jokes in them. They would have been just fine to just progress the plot forwards, tell us what's happening, move the plot forwards, give us a bit of exposition if you need to. But instead it was kind of like they were scared of going, oh no, we haven't made a joke or a silly quip in 30 seconds. The audience might get bored and leave. Quick, have something silly happen.
Let's see. I definitely say, given the fact that this is like, given the fact that the whole Jane and Thor thing is supposed to be the main focal point of their sort of like storyline in this bit, I do feel like it, and given how it's supposed to clash eventually with Gore in the end, it does feel like it should be a bit more of the serious moments, while the more comedic moments should probably be left with when Thor's like talking to, say, someone like Gore, or I mean Korg, or let's see, Valkyrie or something like that. I definitely sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. So I was just going to say, so during all this, obviously Gore kidnaps the kids. And that was, this is perhaps slowly starting to get onto another gripe I had with this film, which was certain things, feeling as if certain aspects of it were not well explained to me why they had happened, or felt a bit convoluted as to why they had happened. So Gore kidnapped the kids, right? And obviously he was like using them to try and lure Thor to his world because he wanted to nick his hammer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Straight away, I thought, well, why did he go to the trouble of kidnapping the kids when he was winning against Thor in the fight in New Asgard?
The only thing I can think of, could think of is the fact that, Thor was surrounded by perhaps maybe a few more Asgardians and all that stuff. Like there was another Thor and that stuff. So, and there's Valkyrie. Perhaps he felt like too many Asgardians, too many gods here. Perhaps it's best to draw Thor away and all that stuff. That's the only thing I can think of, though granted, they probably didn't really show it well enough, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would make a sound enough explanation to go, oh, this is unfriendly territory. I need him on home turf where I can beat him easily. The film didn't communicate that to us. And the other thing, and you've watched it more recently than me, so you might have a better memory of this. What happened to Thor's axe that stopped him from being able to just travel anywhere really quick? Because there was some kind of a plot element where all of a sudden he couldn't just zip from out by holding on to the axe.
The Stormbreaker's Bifrost transportation thing. Apparently, yes. It was getting a bit wonky because, it was getting jealous of, Thor's, wanting Mjolnir back or something.
Right. So because the axe was jealous of the hammer, it didn't want to transport in places.
At least not properly, at least, because he did travel for a bit, but its direction and landings was not ideal because, Thor ended up crashing and all that stuff.
Yeah. So in the end, they had to say, okay, so Thor can't use this axe anymore. Instead, he's got to travel. They had to get like the screaming goats that they got gifted at the start of the film to pull them along where they were going. But I might be skipping ahead a bit too quick here. Because I know that they go and visit the gods for one thing. Thor goes and visits the rest of the gods because he wants to rally them on side to help take down Gore.
Yeah.
And again, I'm interested to hear your. I'll tell you what. I'll let you tell me first because I've been talking a lot so far. What did you make of the whole sort of going and visiting the gods, the Zeus character, or, how all of that played out? What did you make of it?
I thought it was pretty creative with all the type of gods that we saw there, and I think Russell Crowe was pretty funny with the way he portrayed Zeus. Though I will admit, I did think that, and I do like the way how it's like, okay, let's see. Some of these gods are being lazy or being not exactly how you would expect a heroic thing. Thor is like, never meet your hero kind of situation. But I do feel like some of the comedic bits, like, well, the comedic bits about we're gonna have an orgy was going like, okay, I think that's going a bit too far.
That surprised me a little bit for a kids' film.
Yeah, I mean, granted, to be fair, let's see, Taika Waititi did a similar joke earlier with like the ship that Thor and Valkyrie stole from like the game. Let's see, the game master, whatever his cat, Russell. Let's see, Russell Brand. Let's see, I don't know. I can't remember his name, but the game master. Let's see, his ship was a party ship. I think had some, or let's see, it was also for orgies or something like that. I don't know. Perhaps Taika Waititi has a kink joke for like orgy ships or something. But
I wonder how many times up and down the country some little kid turned to their parents and went, "Mummy, what's an orgy?"
Well, I assume the same amount of kids that ended up asking back in, let's see, Spider-Man Homecoming, Mom, Dad, what is porn? But yeah.
Yeah, go on, sorry.
I'm still amazed that Disney allowed those movies to get away with those jokes.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I liked the joke. I liked it in the context it was given and all the rest of it. But I just went, fancy that.
But yeah, but this is probably why, if I ever become a parent, I probably will not let my kids see certain MCU films until they're like teenagers.
But this whole bit where they travel and visit all of these many gods of all these different mythologies and worlds and planets and all the rest of it, and obviously the head honcho of a lot of them is Zeus. It was a very big, grand plot point being introduced. And not only that, but within the context of the previous Thor films, it really felt like it sort of widened the universe a lot to kind of go, oh, actually, there's all of these gods of all of these many different places. It's not just Asgard, Norse mythology-inspired gods. There's gods all over the wazoo, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So it was a big sort of expansion of that kind of lore and mythos within the world itself.
Yeah.
But here's the thing again. There were bits of it that I liked, but I came away from that with a much larger sense of kind of feeling, I feel like they've kind of wasted this concept. I feel like they could have got so much out of the idea of a big society of all of these gods meeting, and the leader of the gods, Zeus, is actually rather corrupt and not that benevolent god. And instead, it was kind of all introduced. They spent 10 minutes with it on screen. None of it was taken very seriously at all. Zeus was... And then they all disappeared, not to be seen again.
Yeah, I mean, let's see, the comedy moment I liked the most was probably, let's see, the bit where he accidentally strips Thor too much, and then he have all his, like, women just fainting and just like, oh my god, look how hot he is, and then getting disappointed when he's covered up. I found that bit.
Yeah.
And and also Natalie, Jane and Valkyrie just like, you know what, we're just going to watch for a little longer just to see, like, Thor's hot bod and all that stuff. I thought that was funny and all that stuff. But I think, this is probably one of the few issues I did end up having with the film, is when there was like a serious moment where, Zeus used his thunderbolt because, when Thor was disappointed, they decided just to steal his thunderbolt to use against Gore and all that stuff. They decided to have Zeus, killing Korg, destroying his pieces, but then turns out he's not dead and he's just a talking face now. Yeah. I felt like that kind of killed the tension or suspense a bit, because it's like you killed off a character only for like, oh no, he's still alive.
And not only that as well, but considering the antagonist of the film is Gore, the God Killer, who's going around murdering all these gods, and we're obviously supposed to think that this is a bad thing to be happening. And then we go and meet all of the gods, and we find out that all of them are a bunch of uncaring assholes. It almost makes you go, well, why are we rooting for Gore to be stopped here? It's not as if these are all a bunch of benevolent, upstanding, nice gods who are doing their jobs well and shouldn't be murdered. It was actually, they're all just a bunch of, they're all just partying all the time. Their leaders are drunk with a dodgy Greek accent. it made me go, well, they probably deserve what's coming to them. To be
Yeah, I
honest.
mean, you could have had some other gods coming along with Thor just to show that not all gods are like this. But interesting enough, Swiss, I've seen on YouTube deleted scenes, and apparently they seem to have changed this. They decided to cut this out or something, or change or rewrite this a bit. But apparently, at some point when Thor and the others are back on Earth and all that stuff, Zeus is actually there, and I think giving Thor advice on how to use the Master Bolt or the Lightning Bolt, if you will. Like he's like seems to have had like a change of heart or something, or at least he was an entirely different character that's being a bit more helpful.
I feel like that should have been in the film. I don't know why it was deleted. That would.
My guess is to set up the post-credit scene, but yeah. But,
yeah. But I suppose. I mean, yeah, we'll get on to the post-credit scene, but within the context of the film, at least, it probably would have benefited from fleshing out that Zeus character to be a bit less of a one-dimensional arsehole, you know, a bit of depth and redemption to him would have been nice. So anyway, we have all of that go on, and then eventually we get to sort of like the first big battle of the movie, where Thor and friends go off to they enter the realm of.
I would say that Thor and Jane Foster rekindle their relationship when, you know, she tells him he has cancer, and Thor's going on a little bit of a speech that Stahl told him earlier about giving a shit about something. And there's a bit of a subtlety, and there's a bit of a hint to where Korg talking about, I think Thor and Jane would make good parents or something like that. Granted, there's a little bit of a...
Is this the scene, by the way, where they're traveling on the boats, like the boat's making a sort of a rainbow road, and the goats are pulling it, and they're out on the boat deck having their little rekindling scene?
Yeah, that happens. Yeah.
From what I remember of that scene, again, that was another one that I felt was just sort of tonally, delivery, a bit all over the place. It was a bit cancer, wacky, whoops, cancer. Whoop.
I felt the Thor and Jane bits were working, though. I felt like the Korg bits were a bit probably not properly placed down. This is probably where Korg probably would have been better off killed at this point. But yeah. Now, granted, there's also a bit of a retcon in Korg's family, because apparently it's like his dad and another guy formed a rock baby and all that stuff. When in Ragnarok, he was apparently in jail for trying to start a revolution, and only his mum and her boyfriend showed up to the revolution. But yeah.
Oh no! This tampering with that essential Korg backstory.
No one really. I doubt most people would care, except maybe the more die-hard continuity lot. But I suppose you could say I sort of slightly care a bit because I like my continuity.
In fairness, you like your lore, you like your continuity.
Yeah. But I guess it's nothing too bad. But yeah. But I definitely felt like the Korg stuff there probably would have been best left out, as Thor and Jane talk about getting back together and confessing that she has cancer. So it's like living the moment situation.
And on that matter as well, that interaction between Thor and Jane there should have been very much on the serious end. They shouldn't have been weaving in little silly, awkward bits with the two of them for that scene. I think it should have just been played straight, you know. But we're here because they're traveling for this big showdown with Gore in the realm of eternity, and we get onto a, you know, considering we've just done gods where I was like, oh, I feel it was silly and it was a wasted opportunity. We've now got to, again, what I'd call probably one of my favorite bits of the film. Stylistically, all of the color drain, it's total monochrome. It's black and white and grayscale. It looks fantastic. It looks beautiful. I feel that it was wasted on this film. It looks so good. Black and white never looked so good.
Yeah, it's like arguably the best scene in the movie, and arguably maybe even the best fight scene in Phase 4.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, so many of these fight scenes these days rely on such heavy CGI, but I think the fact that it was black and white and monochrome, it was able to mask the obviousness of the CGI better. I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying that very well. Obviously, it's CGI. We know that these aren't practical effects, but you don't take yourself out of the moment by noticing the CGI as much, because it just all blends in much nicer together. The stylistic choices they're making.
Yeah, and the lighting works when, let's see, you have Thor and Jane using their hammers and a Valkyrie using the lightning bolt, because they give that to her, because there's another joke about Stormbreaker being jealous of Thor with a lightning weapon.
Yeah, so this again, I think it totally spanned maybe 10 minutes of the movie where they're sort of trapped in all this black goop, and Christian Bale is, chewing the scenery and stealing the scenes again. And then there's these big fights on this planet and all these just awesome looking effects going on. And like I say, the way it's stylistically put, I loved this. One of my favorite bits of the film. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Arguably, if this was a climax of the film, I think many people say this is perfect or something.
It's in a way, because compared to the climax of the film that we got, I wish this had been the final fight scene.
Yeah.
It sucks so much that this was just the middle fight scene. The tension in it so should have been the final fight scene. Because obviously the final fight scene, and well, we'll get there soon enough because we're not too far off. So let's very quickly sort of say, so what happens? So Jane gets involved in the fight. It's revealed that sort of the more she uses the mighty Thor powers, the more it's actually knackering her human body. And she's just done in. She ends up back in a hospital bed again. And Thor's kind of like, oh, Jane, you can't come with me for this final showdown with Gore.
Because when Thor transported them out of their Gore also stole a hammer.
Oh yes, I should say. So at the end of this fight, Gore ends up with the hammer. The hammer or the axe? Which one was it? Was it
the axe? Sorry, because the axe itself can transport to the Bifrost and all that stuff, and he needs the Bifrost to get to this celestial kind of like being that whoever gets to it can make a wish, any wish they want. And for someone called the God Butcher, you know what he's going to wish for.
Yeah, so that ends up so the axe ends up being like the MacGuffin of the movie. That's why Gore is really after Thor. He wants his axe so he can open up this gateway and go and get his wish from the most powerful wish god there is.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jane's life force is getting drained. She ends up back in hospital. Thor says, "All right, I'm gonna have to go handle this myself."
Valkyrie got injured in the fight and all that stuff as well.
Yes. And here's another thing about Valkyrie, right? What did you think of her in this film? Because I remember her from Ragnarok, and I remember liking her as a character and thinking that the actress played her well. And in this film, I just kept getting annoyed by her. I wasn't feeling her at all.
I think they just didn't really know what to do with her, I think, in this film, to be honest, because, well, a sort of story arc was kind of completed in Endgame, if you will.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, in Ragnarok, a lot of the time she was playing a drunk. So maybe the actress was more convincing at playing a drunk person than a sober one, possibly.
They kind of switch her motivations, like, oh, I want to be a warrior that dies in the battlefield, just like, you know what, if I go with you, I'm probably going to die. But then again, I guess you could argue her condition means that she dies without actually helping the children and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I've just realised really quick, I know we skipped over this earlier, but back when it had been revealed that all the kids had been kidnapped and they got in touch with Axel, you must have seen this, that spot of really dodgy looking CGI where his head's just floating there and it looks like someone's green screened it on with a laptop.
The bit where Gore traumatizes the children with a ripped off head.
Yeah, but where Axel's actually appearing to them in New Asgard and he's just projecting himself, but it looks that it looked like the sort of CGI you'd get in like a CBBC kids show.
My understanding, Disney has not been treating its VX CGI artists that well, and I think they've lost quite a few of them, so they're pushing others to work hard, and that's why apparently the MCU's CGI effects have been waning down over the last few years.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
I mean, let's see. Disney might be socially progressive on certain topics, but never really on the economic and workers, as they've clashed with Bernie. Though, granted, they're not exactly ideal with LGBT stuff. Let's see, either, to be honest. If you ask people how they cancelled the Owl House, but
what's that? What's that? A seemingly socially progressive mega corporation turning out to be a bunch of evil corporate bastards? Who would have thought? Never.
Yeah, yeah. Love the movies, shows they make, but hate the company. It's like I say.
Yes, the Disney overlords. But anyway, so Thor goes to do this final showdown battle with Gore, and he's still got all the kids. Remember, kids are still there as well. And they're right next to this gateway that's going to be opened, and Gore's going to go get his wish. And obviously, everyone's assuming, oh, he's going to kill all the gods. So there's a sense in urgency that Thor has to stop him, otherwise, bye all of the gods, including Thor. So he's fighting him. He's not having a great time. Gore unleashes a bunch of hell demons or whatever they are to all the kids are in danger and everything. And then Thor goes, oh, I've got an idea. I'm just going to give all of my Thor powers to these 20-odd kids and let them all fight the monsters. Go on, kids, have my Thor powers. And he just gives them his Thor powers.
Yeah, your honorary Asgardians, because not all of them are technically Asgardians.
Now, can I ask you, John, at any point in Thor 1, Thor 2, any of the Avengers films, 3, had we ever had any kind of an inkling that Thor had the ability to just give his powers to people?
No, not really. Otherwise, I felt like he would have done it. I mean, granted, you could technically have Thor's powers if you were worthy of his hammer, but he's never really given others like the powers, to be honest, nor could he have hint that.
Yeah, so this struck me as super odd and, just ill thought through in a way.
Yeah. And anyways, I feel like they only did this just because, like, okay, there's no way people are going to believe kids with no training or combat experience whatsoever, taking on these bunch of monsters unless they've like, oh, okay, they got force powers. That kind of makes sense.
But I almost feel as if they couldn't explain it in a satisfactory way, why try to get why the audience was not crying out to go, oh please, we need to see these kids in action. We've got to see the little girl with the rabbit batter a monster. That's what we want.
Yeah, I will admit, I'd probably say, I mean, fair to the kids, it was probably the time of their lives, getting to be a superhero in a Marvel movie and all that stuff. I bet every one of them probably enjoyed that, but...
oh, good for them. I'm sure they enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it in the cinema.
But I feel like, for some people, this is probably like how, some Star Wars fans felt about the Ewoks and the Empire, though I personally like the Ewoks, that's just me, but let's see.
I feel like... Sorry, John, go on.
But I feel like, given the fact that you're having these kids fight these monsters, I feel like, Marvel and Disney aren't going to kill a bunch of kids on screen and stuff. So it's like, it kind of, throws away the suspense and tension of this final battle. You're not going to, these kids aren't going to die.
Yeah, and it's like, I felt there were so many ways to get around it. Obviously, you don't have the kids fight the monsters. You don't have the monsters. You have the kids get rescued, and it's a final Thor showdown with him and Gore. Or something. Or Christ, even if you want an explanation rather than just going, oh, guess what? Thor can give his powers to people. I know it could have came in handy in a few previous films he's been in, but what if they'd brought, like, Zeus's bolt back into the equation? Say that had never got nullified and Thor was still using that. And
he was using that.
Well, in that case, if you're introducing a brand new weapon that's never been seen before in any other films, why not say that Thunderbolt has the power to give the power of the gods to anyone, rather than just going, Thor could do it wrong, but he's only just chosen to do it now? it would have made the Thunderbolt feel more important, and like it was, you know, like coming full in a way that he needed the Thunderbolt, and they went and got the Thunderbolt, and in the end, it served a purpose.
Yeah, that would probably made a lot more sense. The only other thing I can think of is that you had some of the gods that were introduced in like the Utopia bit earlier and all that stuff, having been inspired by Thor's words and actions, decide to come and help him. That's the only other kind of thing I could think of.
That would have been nice. You know, all the kids are cowering and there's a giant boulder about to fall on them, or they're going to get eaten by some animal. And then, who is it? It's Zeus and some of his mates. And they've come to save the day and help Thor out because they decided actually a good idea not to get killed by Gore, you know? Mm-hmm. But so yeah, I'm afraid, like I said to you before, John, you know, the film and certain bits throughout the film, there were bits that I liked, but overall, and especially near the end, I feel that lots of it just sort of fell apart for me, to be honest with you.
I can understand that.
But anyway, we so Natalie Portman and Jane Foster, I ought to say, reappears, and ultimately this door is opened to this this.
No, not before the combined efforts of Thor and Jane are able to destroy the god-killing sword. Let's see a bit. I should probably mention that, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's it. So through to this. I mean, what's it called? This ethereal other eternity? Was that the name of the place or the?
Yeah. I think it's eternity. Hold on, let me just get. Let's see. Yeah, eternity. Yeah, eternity. This being called eternity.
I'm just going to read this real quick bit from the Wikipedia synopsis here. So, Thor travels to Eternity's altar alone and using Zeus' bolt imbues the... Wait, what? He uses Zeus' thunderbolt to imbue the children with the power to fight Gore's monsters.
Okay,
Did he use the thunderbolt for that? I just completely missed that he used that. I don't remember them explaining in the film that
he used the thunderbolt, but he never made it clear that it was just the power of the Thunderbolt, or but more like just the power of Thor, really.
This is what I'm on about. This film needs to us. What's happening a little bit better to us? We can't make all these leaps and assumptions. You need to tell us.
I mean, yeah, he used the Thunderbolt, but I don't think he made it clear whether or not that's something he could do with the Thunderbolt or just by himself. From what I'm recalling. So.
That could have been handy. Maybe just a single line of dialogue. Oh, by the way, this Thunderbolt can give god powers to kids. Look at that. But anyway, so imbues the children with the power to fight Gore's monsters while he battles Gore. When Foster senses that Gore is about to kill Thor, she joins the battle and saves him. They destroy the Necro Sword, freeing Gore's influence, but the three are brought to Eternity's realm. With Gore poised to make his wish, Thor implores Gore, God, there's a lot of Thor in these sentences, to revive his daughter instead of destroying the gods. Now, I mean, feels nice. That feels like a nice little redemption arc in a way. That sort of like, you know, the influence of the Necro Sword falls. He's no longer got that desperation to kill all the gods, and instead, pretty obviously, might I add, I don't know why bloody didn't think of this himself. Why not revive your daughter? Instead of seeking revenge against all these gods you don't know, because kid's dead, why not bring your kid back?
I assume it's mostly due to the fact that the god slaying sword thing was also a bit of whispering in his ear, influencing him to not, let's see, think this, but more on like the more anger and hate bit. I guess you could say it's like the dark side of Force, that like your worst impulses rather than your rational, if you could. I think that's the way it was probably explained.
He was so taken over by the dark side of the Force, basically.
It's like he's so taken by the sword that, let's see, when Thor was trying to appeal to him to do that instead, he doesn't get through it first until he says, like, you know what, you win, but if this is going to be what you do, I'm not going to waste the last moments of my life, let's see, trying to stop you. I'm going to try and spend the last moments of my life with the woman I love in her final moments.
Now, one more little thing here. So obviously, because Jane Foster has used her powers again, she ends up dying in Thor's arms. which
Yeah.
is it's a pretty sad moment, and probably one of the few moments that I feel they actually get tonally correct. They take it seriously. They make it seems right the way that they do it. But Gore dies, and it says here on the Wikipedia entry that Gore dies from the curse, so the curse of the Necro Sword, I take. Again, it would have been nice to me, maybe just for the sake of it in this film, what if it wasn't just the curse that killed him? What if, in order to make this wish, this eternal, all-powerful being, it must be a life for a life. I can only bring back a life if I take a life. And Gore sacrifices himself to bring his daughter back. Now, there's some real redemption, you know? That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, he brings his daughter back. So Jane dies, Gore dies, the daughter comes back, and she has a final moment with his dad before he passes away. And then we come to sort of like the wrapping up, the very end of the film, and it turns out that Thor has basically adopted Gore's daughter and is now sort of raising her as his daughter. And then we find out why the title of the film is what it is, because Thor is thunder and the daughter is called Love and Thunder. And it basically ends with them both, you know, charging off into the distance to go have some adventure or something.
Yeah, saving planets from like alien, barbarians and all that stuff. Sort of like Thor getting a sort of like sidekick, if you will.
Yeah. And again, I've got to say, it felt a bit quick to leap from, oh, you've just been brought back to life and now your dad's dead. End of scene. Next scene, you know, admittedly, yes, it is a flash forward, but it would have to be. Then they go, oh, and now they're, you know, Thor and his new adopted daughter are having a great old time together and they're doing their own thing. And this is what's happening now. The end. Goodbye.
Yeah, I definitely, I know T.T. Waititi wanted to stick to like the 2-hour mark, but I feel like there probably should have been some sort of funeral-like scene here for like Jane Foster, where you see like some of like her sort of loved ones, just because you never know if they ever, because they never really see them react to her dying and all that stuff. So it's like, I kind of feel like you could have done something like that. Granted, yes, I know Jane Foster had a flashback of her mother dying of cancer and all that stuff, but you could at least have the Dark and like a friend from the first 2 Thor movies, learning about how she died and paying tribute and all that stuff. And this is a bit where the core narration kind of gets a bit, probably like a bit too jokey now, because like, I found someone of my same species to partner with, and you get like these little jokes about how Valkyrie and Civ are now training the kids for self-defense lessons and all that stuff, which, okay, fair enough. You probably would want to teach them that the next time they get kidnapped, but still.
Yeah, and Core, like, and then this is in sort of like, you know, Core doing his narration again, sort of wrapping everything up with a nice little bow, and it goes, and I found myself love, and sort of you didn't see that coming. It's another man rock person, and he looks just like him but with a moustache, and they have a little kiss or something.
They grab hands, I believe.
Oh, they grab hands. Yeah. Disney didn't want to be that brave. They didn't want to be brave enough to have a gay kiss on screen. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's the obligatory gay moment where they can remove it for the China screening.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, you know, they don't even get any points for that because they went into it bloody half-hearted in the first place. And I'm sure that the director at some point had gone, oh yeah, there's gay characters in this film and it's a really LGBT friendly film or whatever, and then you get 2 seconds of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Robin has told me that it's a recurring joke in the LGBT community that Disney will say, oh, we've created some great characters, then do very little or anything. The only thing I've seen of them that they've actually committed to the LGBT stuff is a cartoon show called The Owl House, and they've cancelled that for the 3rd season, and it's only getting like 3 40-minute specials. So it's like, let's see. So it's like, I mean, that's a bit of a shame.
So, I mean, here's the thing. For me personally, I don't care one way or the other whether or not the rock man is gay and finds a boyfriend. It doesn't add or subtract from the film whatsoever. But it is just funny to me that they sort of big it up and say, look at all these things we're doing. And then they just give it like 2 quick on-screen seconds and it's hand-holding, you know?
Yeah, I mean, anyways, it does. Let's see, it does feel like some of that stuff that just gets drawn into a pointless culture war in a sense, because like, let's see, you get the one hand people like, oh my god, I'm so excited, like, oh no, this is the PC agenda kind of thing, and it's like, oh, it's only 2 seconds. There's no point in making a big deal about it. But yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry. I think my internet must have blipped for a second because I didn't hear the second. PC culture and it's like.
It's
and I missed the rest.
And it's only like 2 seconds. Like it's not worth all that effort of complaining or talking about it.
Yeah. Exactly. Very quickly then, let's just mention the credit scenes and then we'll bring it all back round and give our final thoughts. So we had a. Oh, actually, I think you're probably best placed to talk about this because I've only heard of them. I walked out of the cinema. I did not bother seeing the credit scenes for this.
Okay.
So
let's see. Well, during like the Thor's clash with Zeus, he threw the thunderbolt. He grabbed Zeus's thunderbolt and threw it through his chest, and it looked like he killed Zeus at the end. But turns out Zeus was alive, and he's made a conclusion that the gods seem to be now treated as a joke, not taken seriously, and all that stuff. And he seems to blame it on Thor, who's been all hero-like, who's now making people think that God should be expected to be like Thor, rather than beings that should be feared and worshipped. So he concludes that they need to get rid of Thor to bring back the respect and fear that the gods need. So he sends his son, Hercules, to fight Thor. And this is the incredible Hercules' introduction to the MCU, because Hercules is actually a superhero in the Marvel comics. In the DC ones, he's more of a villain, but that's a whole, a long explanation. But in many ways, like I said earlier, the Hercules in the comics is a bit more of the jokey hero that Thor is in the MCU and all that stuff. So whether or not they're going to change it around a bit, I do not know. But yeah, but at the very least, it seems like the next movie is implying that Thor is going to be clashing with Hercules. And we're going to see a bit more of the Greek gods in the Thor mythos. Like you said, they're expanding the world of gods a bit with the Thor franchise. And then the second one is a post-credits where one thing they've talked about is, I believe, Jotunheim or Heimdall, or, well, Valhalla, I believe, where, where you die and you go to Valhalla, the sort of Norse version of heaven and all that stuff. And you see Natalie Portman, Jane Foster, has been accepted there. And he's meeting Heimdall and he's welcoming him there. And and then afterwards you got like a Thor will return kind of thing. Though it's not really implying if it's just going to be Chris Hemsworth Thor, or is it possible that, given the fact that you have like a actual version of heaven, you might actually see all the dead characters of Thor again in some form in the next film. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, having Jane Foster arriving in Valhalla, that's probably it's a nice little wrap up for her character. It's the last time we see her, and it's probably a nice little reassuring thing for the kids in the audience as well. Going, don't worry, guys, Jane's just fine. She's living it up in the big meat hall of battling and whatever. It's funny about the Thor will return thing, because I was flicking through the Wikipedia page for this prior to us going live. Apparently, both the director and Chris Hemsworth, neither of them were aware Thor will return was getting put on the end of this until it was. It just happened, and then they found out once the film was released. Neither of them knew this, which I think is quite funny. So John, overall, what did you think of the film? How would you compare it to other Thor films and other Marvel films more generally? And can you give me a rating out of 10?
When I first saw it, I enjoyed it. I thought it was like, this would probably end up being well liked by people. But then I saw the mixed response, and I was like, wait, was there something wrong with the way I was seeing it? So I figured I'd end up seeing it again. And I saw it, and I didn't hate it. I still liked it, though I did see more of the flaws. And I can see why people might hate this film. And I could definitely say, and it's given me this kind of glimpse. It seems like in the Thor movies, it seems it has a sort of like the Star Trek curse a bit with the films. And I think you probably might know this because you're a bit of a Star Trek fan. But I think they said that every Star Trek movies, the certain odd number of films would be bad, and even the ones good. Though, except for like Thor, it seems it might be the reverse and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like, in many ways, similar to how people might say the Indiana Jones movies, well, at least, well, I don't know, people like all three of the original Indiana Jones films, and the fourth one is a bit more mixed divided. But I do remember that, the Temple of Doom was also controversial for its time. So it's like, the Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade, really loved. Temple of Doom, Crystal Skull, controversial for their releases and all that stuff.
Yep.
And like the Daniel Craig James Bond, the odd numbered films were more well received, but the even ones were a lot more negative. So it seems like, is this the sort of Thor effect? Is this like what's going to be happening with Thor movies? You have like the odd numbered ones liked and the even ones hated.
I mean, all I can say is I feel like the next Thor film will be better than this one. So that would probably be keeping to your theory there. But yeah. I've got a low opinion of this film, so it probably wouldn't be that hard for the next one to be better. Yeah. But sorry, carry on anyway.
But it does feel like, in a sense, well, not many people were like, I'd say, in love with Thor in the first Thor film. They at least had stuff that they liked, like Loki and all that stuff. Then Dark World happened, and I think it killed off a bit of interest in Thor. Then Ragnarok rebrought interest in the character and all that stuff, back and making him sort of like another addition to like the trio of like the Marvel's main heroes of Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man. And now this one is like maybe putting off some people again from Thor, or even maybe even the director Taika Waititi, who I will admit seems to have been having so many projects. Let's see. And he's even got his own Star Wars film in the works. And I think it's got some people worried again. Kind of like how when Patty Jenkins was announced to do this Star Wars movie called Rogue Sergeant, and then Wonder Woman 2 came out, people were like, oh, I'm not so sure now, but like that. Now, in terms of this film, I'd say it's better than Dark World. Though with like 4-1, it really varies, but I think most people would probably say 4-1 is better. I definitely say Ragnarok is probably the best Thor film. Now, I don't hate this film. I don't say I'm like super, this is the best film ever. But I feel like this film is like in the sort of mid-tier of MCU films. I mean, I definitely say out of the, I think 6 films at the Phase 4, it's, we've had Black Widow, we've had Shang-Chi, The Eternals, No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and for Love and Thunder. I definitely say out of those films, it's in 4th place because I think Shang-Chi, No Way Home, and Doctor Strange 2 are probably better films from my taste. Though, some people, I guess, depends on how people feel about Shang-Chi, I guess, or No Way Home. But I definitely say Multiverse of Madness is probably the best film so far. But I definitely say that this movie, it's more the average, like it's got its good moments, but it's got its bad moments in the MCU. So it's probably like at best a 7 out of 10, and at worst more like a 5 out of 10.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I guess I'll preface my assessment by saying I probably did come out of this a bit more critical of it than yourself, but obviously that is fine because we are able to enjoy different things for different reasons. I was fairly, aside from the mixed reviews I saw before I saw this film, I was quite excited to see it because I liked Ragnarok. I thought that was probably my favorite Thor film, and I knew that this one was being directed by the same guy. I'd seen the trailer. I was excited by the trailer, Christian Bale's character, and it looked interesting. So I was going into it with an open mind, willing to, okay, I'll make my own assessment of it, Sort of to repeat myself very quickly from what I've said for most of the film, there were pockets of it that I enjoyed, mostly within the first third of it or so. By far, my favorite bit of it was Christian Bale. He stole every scene he was in. I really liked that fight scene that they had in the middle that was all in black and white, very stylistic. I just feel that the film itself was of such a weird mixture and a hodgepodge of conflicting styles, conflicting tones, not always being able to understand too clearly why certain things were happening, or at least feeling that it was a bit silly, convoluted reasons they'd given for things that were happening. I feel like the whole thing was just drowned with these unnecessary jokes. Where I'd place it amongst other Marvel films, I think had you said you said that this was probably your third favorite, so above Dark World but behind the first and Ragnarok. Is that right?
Yeah. In terms of the 4 movies, that's where I'd probably rank it. And in terms of Phase 4, it's probably the 4th best out of the 6 that have come out. Some 6 that come out so far. Granted, there's also all these Disney Plus shows, but let's not get those into there.
Oh God, no. I'd say that obviously the thing is, of the Thor films, it's been in 2 halves really, because 1 and 2 were very, very tonally different from 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So the thing is, what 1 and 2, they're not my favorite of the Marvel films. They're probably not even in the top third or so. But at least they were, back when Marvel was first starting out, every film was a little bit different, You had a different character in a different setting with a slightly different tonal theme, but the whole point was it was all getting weaved together, that all these different worlds were part of the same larger whole, and it was all advancing this Thanos plot ever so gradually, But with this one, I can understand people going, oh, well, Dark World was a bit boring. There wasn't enough going on with it. But at the very least, that's probably the worst thing I could say about Dark World, that I thought it was boring at times. With this film, I found myself actually getting annoyed at it, which is probably a sign that I liked it less, because a film should not annoy me while I'm watching it. So I'm afraid this is my worst Thor film. And it's probably one of the worst MCU films as well. I can't out and out say it is the worst, because I'd need to go back and watch the Incredible Hulk one again and a couple of others. But it's wrong for me.
Yeah.
To be totally honest with you.
Not to mention, I don't think you've seen Eternals yet, and many people, and that's the first MCU movie with a Rotten Tomatoes score.
Wow. Yes. I should say, in fairness, I haven't seen that many Phase 4 films. The only Phase 4 films I've seen are this Thor film, Multiverse of Madness, and Spider-Man No Way Home. So out of those 3, this comes third. I can say that much for sure. As far as the star rating goes, honestly, I'm talking 3 or 4. 3.5 out of 10. That's what I'm giving this film. It is seriously. I rank most of the Marvel films as being good, solid films. And this is one of the first ones that I've watched and genuinely felt like I was slowly being driven mad watching it and going, I can't leave. I paid for my ticket. I need to see this through to the end.
Okay.
But if I was sitting at home watching it on streaming, I probably would have turned it off halfway through, honestly.
Well, I guess we now know what we're to use to torture you, Swiss.
Yeah. If you want to torture me, put me down in front of Thor: Love and Thunder. Seriously. But like I say, it's a shame, because I think there were the bones of a really good movie here. I liked the overall plot, the overall idea of the antagonist, the backstory, some of the stylistic choices, like I say, in the fight scene, everything to do with Christian Bale. There were the bones of a good story. There were plot points that I would keep exactly the same. It was just all of this silliness that just, some of it just did not work in the way that comedy in Marvel films tends to work.
Yeah. And interesting enough, I've heard rumors that apparently, due to the mixed response, they're not going to have Taika Waititi back as the director for 4-5.
Good. Good. Look, the man did a great job with Ragnarok. I don't know what went wrong. Was he given too much creative control with Thor 4? Were there more hands steering the ship with the third one, and this one they just went, oh, Ragnarok was so good. Look, do it all yourself, mate. It's all yours. And then that's what happens.
it's possible that he's got like a lot of projects on, so his talent is not exactly completely focused on this film. For I know. I mean, that's.
I feel.
Sorry,
do you remember what? Sorry, do you remember what people said about like the Star Wars films? Where like they were like, "Oh, George Lucas, you're a genius. Look at these amazing films you made." And then the prequels were done, and those were just all George Lucas. And then you go, "Oh, this is what it looks like when it's 100% George Lucas."
Oh yeah, they went like, "George Lucas, you're a god. George Lucas, you're an antichrist. George Lucas, come back. We need you to be the savior."
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the way for me to sum it up in a way. Can I tell you one thing that I found out from this Wikipedia article very quickly, which I find very funny and perhaps telling about these films? You know how the whole film was narrated by Korg the Rockman?
Yes.
Do you know who plays Korg the Rockman?
Yes, Taiki Wakiti. I mean,
yes. The director of the film has self-inserted himself as a character and narrates the thing himself.
Yes, I mean, I'm not surprised because I know he's a bit of an actor because I think he played the bad guy in a movie called Free Guy, you know, Ryan Reynolds, who's like playing as like a video game non-PC character. And in The Mandalorian, he directed a few episodes, and he's also the voice of that assassin droid in the first season. I'm not sure how much you've watched of The Mandalorian, to be honest, but
I've seen none of it, to be completely honest with you.
But he is a director for at least 2 of those episodes, and I think he's getting his own Star Wars movie. So, yeah, he's got his own projects and all that stuff, other projects going on besides Thor. So, who knows? But yeah.
So very quickly, what was your rating out of 10? By the way,
I'd say you could rank it between a 5 to a 7 out of 10.
Shall we average it as a 6, just for the sake of argument, then?
It seems like with our 2 scores, let's see, it would probably be around an average of 6 or 5.
Yeah. Oh, I think with my score dragging it down, probably it's an average of 5 out of 10 between the 2 of us. Then.
Yeah, between the 2 of us.
Between the two of us, you're dragging the score up. But
yeah.
All right then, guys. So, from Captain Swiss and John Cooper, Thor: Love and Thunder, average score 5 out of 10. You might enjoy it. You might enjoy it more than me. I seem to have a real visceral reaction to it that made me angry in ways that other things don't. Perhaps you'll enjoy it more.
Yeah, you're probably gonna either love it or hate it.
Yes, you will either feel love or you will feel thunder. It will be one of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, but who knows? Maybe next time we do something like this, we'll try and get more people to watch the films.
Yes. But by all means, ladies and gents, if you're watching this review, and God knows it could be a day after we post it, it could be years after we post it. Have you seen the film? Are you about to watch the film? Come back in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts on it and what your rating out of 10 would be as well. With that, I suppose it's time to wrap up the stream. So I would just say, John, thank you very much for joining me for this. I'm aware, by the way, the running time of this film was 119 minutes, so just shy of 2 hours. We have gone for nearly an hour and 45 minutes. We have taken nearly as long to review this film as the actual length of the film itself.
Yeah. Like I said, I'll take a while to summarize things. So.
But there we have it. So thank you very much, guys. The next time you hear from me, I'm sure it will be something Tory Party conference related.
I mean,
this has been on the books for a little while.
I mean, you had just had Liz Truss U-turning, so yeah, there's probably going to be a lot more chaos soon. So no surprise. But yeah,
I want a version of this film where someone CGI'd like Liz Truss to be the female Thor, to be mighty Thor Liz Truss.
Did you know? I'm not sure if you know this, Swiss, but I think there was actually some Corbyn video meme about Thor Ragnarok where they had him as Thor and May as the Hulk.
I remember seeing that. Yeah, I saw that at the time. They had Theresa May as Thor's sister in it. I've forgotten her name, but yeah.
I can't remember the name either. But then they had Boris Johnson as the Hulk.
Well, in this one, I don't know how this fits into the lore that we're building, but naturally, I want Keir Starmer to be Gore. Simply because I'm enjoying all these Dark Starmer memes at the moment.
Yeah, Starmer, this is my decree. All socialists must be purged.
Oh, right. Anyway, that was that. So, I will end the stream in which case then. Ladies and gents, thank you very much. Drop the stream a like if you enjoyed it. We will catch you next time. Ta-ta.
Yeah, bye.